What's up guys, welcome to this lesson. In this lesson we're going to be learning about musical intervals. Now what is a musical interval? Well, a musical interval is the distance between one note and another note. So for example, from the key of C to the key of G, that is a musical interval. From the key of D to the key of E, that is a musical interval. So the distance between one note and another note, that is the definition of a musical interval. By the way, when I said that a musical interval is the distance between two musical notes, the distance that I was referring to is the distance in terms of pitch. So I wasn't referring to the distance in terms of physical distance. I was referring to the distance in terms of pitch. So a musical interval is the distance in terms of pitch between two musical notes. So when we talk about pitch, we're basically talking about in terms of how high or how low a musical note sounds. So just remember that a musical interval is the distance in terms of pitch between two musical notes. So let me say that again. A musical interval is the distance in terms of pitch between two musical notes. Now, we're going to be learning about different types of musical intervals in this lesson. So yeah, let's start. Now, whenever you move from one key to the next key, so for example, if you move from the key of C to the key of C sharp, that is known as moving up by a half step or by a semitone. So moving from one key to the next key is known as moving up by a half step or by a semitone. So if I move from the key of E to the key of F, that means that I've moved up by a half step or by a semitone. So if I move from the key of B to the key of C, that means that I've moved up by a half step or by a semitone. So if I move from the key of D to the key of D sharp, then that means that I've moved up by a half step or by a semitone. See that? Now, if I move from one key to another key and I skip a key in between, so for example, if I move from the key of C to the key of D, I've skipped the key of C sharp in between. Therefore, this means that I've moved up by a whole step or by a whole tone. So moving from one key to another key and skipping a key in between is known as moving up by a whole step or by a whole tone. Of course, if you move from one key and you move down to another key and you skip a key in between, then that means you've moved down by a whole step or by a whole tone. And if you move from one key down to the next key, so for example from the key of C to the key of B, then that is known as moving down by a half step or by a semitone. See that? Now if I move from one key to another key and I skip two keys in between, so for example, if I move from the key of C to the key of E flat, I've skipped the key of C sharp and D in between. So this means that I've moved up by 1.5 steps. If you look, you'll see that from year to year is a half step, from year to year is a half step, from year to year is a half step. So 3 half steps makes 1.5 steps. 3 times 0.5 equals 1.5. See that? So the key thing is to remember that moving from one key to the next key, whether up or whether down, is moving by a half step or by a semitone. See that? So if I move from the key of C to the key of E, can you guess how many half steps I've moved by? Well, I've moved by 4 half steps, which is equivalent to 2 whole steps. See that? So from here to here is 1 half step. From here to here is 1 half step. So we've got 2 half steps so far. From here to here is 1 half step. So we've got 3 half steps. From here to here is another half step. So we've got 4 half steps. And 4 half steps makes 2 whole steps. 4 times 0.5 equals 2. See that? Now let's talk about what an octave is. Now what is an octave? Well, an octave is the distance between a particular key and the same letter key. Now what do I mean by that? Well, this is what I mean. So for example, if we pick the key of D, now the distance between this D and another D, so for example here, the distance between this D and this D, that is known as an octave. And the distance that I'm referring to is the distance in terms of pitch. So remember that the distance that I'm referring to is the distance in terms of pitch. So the distance between any particular key and the same letter key is known as an octave. So for example, the distance between this key of E flat and this key of E flat, that is known as an octave. So the distance between this key of F sharp and this key of F sharp, the distance between these 2 keys is known as an octave. The distance between this key of A flat and this A flat, the distance between these 2 keys is known as an octave.